As we said, even as gaming developers celebrate how AI pushes the industry forward, some storm clouds gather in the form of tariffs. Last month, the Entertainment Software Association urged the U.S. government to protect the gaming industry. The organization represents big names in gaming like Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, and more. It says tariffs will affect video game devices and related products and harm the nearly $60 billion industry in the U.S. For more insight into tariffs and the gaming industry, let's bring in Louis Ward. He's Research Director of XR Gaming and Interactive 3D Software at the International Data Corporation. Welcome to the show. Great having you. I want to know how much of a concern were these tariffs at the GDC this year?
Yes, it did come up. There were a few, folks that wouldn't go on the record about it, of course, but basically there is concern that, as prices go up, demand will fall. And so while there was a lot more going on at this week's show, that was certainly one of the concerns out there that was brought up several times.
And how could the Trump administration's proposed tariffs will impact the cost of video game consoles, accessories, physical game copies, and so on?
Right. Yes, I agree that, game consoles and physical packaged game discs and so forth and accessories and laptops, they're all not immune from the same forces of supply and demand. So if tariffs go into effect, some portion of that cost will be likely passed on to consumers by, producers and retailers or vendors and retailers.
Out of what you heard at the conference, do you believe that gaming companies will lobby against tariffs, or what else can they do?
Well, there are, capabilities to shift production in some cases. Now, that's not always easy to do or quick to do, but the companies that have the ability to do it will very likely do that. For those that can't, they're likely to pass on the cost of those production increases to the consumer. So I saw, for example, that I believe the CEO of Acer said in a February interview that if the tariffs went up 10% in the U.S., that, pretty much that 10% cost would be put on the cost of their laptops coming into the United States. Now, not every company is going to do that. They're not necessarily going to do that full 10%, but some of them that have no choice will probably pass on most of that cost. And so that's what I would expect.
I'd like to dig a little deeper, Luis, because other countries may also impose retaliatory tariffs. How might that affect the US-based game developers and publishers looking to sell internationally?
Right. To the extent that there are, retaliatory tariffs or, kind of equal and opposite tariffs that go into effect, it doesn't really change between the U.S. and other countries. As the price goes up, demand usually goes down. And so the underlying or the overarching premise in both situations is the same, is that demand will fall and, you might see inflationary effects and so on.
And Luis, we've been seeing, we saw a report a minute ago about different innovations in the sector, right? And many gaming companies for these innovations rely on hardware made in China. What are the potential consequences if tariffs drive up these production costs, and especially if China gets the tariffs that the Trump administration is proposing?
Oh, right. So, as I said, to the extent that companies are able to avoid the tariffs by moving production to other nations that aren't as affected, or, I think in the case of steel and aluminum, it's kind of a general tariff, so that's very difficult to avoid. But specifically for the Chinese manufactured products, they will attempt to shift production in order to increase or keep supply where it is without having to increase prices. But if that for the companies that can't do that, they kind of don't have a choice. They're probably going to have to pass it on to the consumer, and so basically demand usually falls, and that can be bad for people that work in that industry.
I see, and the industry is all about creativity, coming up with novel ideas. What do you think this means for innovation in video game development?
Yeah, that's a huge topic. I guess my first sense is that when we're talking about video games in particular, those cycles are usually measured in years, and therefore, I don't think the innovation will be affected near term, right? Because these are commitments that are made well before the Trump administration was even brought into office, and they will continue, for years into the future. So I don't think the innovation per se will take a hit, but it is a concern that if the tariffs stay high, that over time those increased costs will kind of force companies to rethink their priorities, and that could, curtail innovation. But I think that's a long way off right now.
I see. In the shorter term, but let's talk about the medium term, right? What should consumers and industry professionals watch for in the coming, weeks, months?
Yeah, good question. So I guess there's, three things that I'd say there that do the proposed tariffs in early April actually go into effect would be the obvious one. Secondly, do the particular, game consoles or accessories or, packaged video games and so forth that they're after, do you see producers and e-tailers or retailers increasing those prices potentially in relation to the tariffs? And third, I believe the Federal Reserve, this is not kind of beyond what I do, but I believe they're meeting in early May. So something to look out for in early May, because I believe Chairman Powell said this week that there is a relationship between general or core inflation and tariffs, that usually those things go together or correlate positively. So I guess something to look out for in early May is, what is the Fed saying about what they're seeing in terms of general U.S. inflation and what that could mean for, the economy moving forward in general.
Louis Ward, thank you for your insights.